Welcome back, everybody, to part two of the 49ers Webzone Writer Roundtable. I am Rohan Chakravarthi, and with me I've got Brian Rennick, Justin Wong, and Sasha Robinson, all of whom are writers for 49ers Webzone. Before I start, be sure to subscribe to the 49ers Webzone channel. We are posting this on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all over, so be sure to check us out. And then also be sure to watch our inaugural episode last Friday. This is going to be a weekly thing, so I'm excited to just talk some 49ers with some of the guys. And before I get started, how are y'all? Brian, we can start with you.
Doing
I'm
good.
doing. I'm doing good. It's I'm in the Sacramento area. It's about to be 103 today, so just trying to beat the heat a little bit. Got all-star 8U girls softball all-star practice later today, coaching my daughter's team. So had our first tournament last weekend, came in second, so pretty excited about that. So yeah, that's kind of been my focus lately. But excited to talk Niners ball as always.
Yeah, I was complaining at first because I'm in Berkeley. It's like in the 80s right now. And that was pretty hot. I talked to Brian, being in Sacramento, it's in triple digits, so it's all relative. But I'm good, man. If anything, obviously we're here for Niners football. But for those that know, there's a basketball game this Friday tonight, Warriors, and so that's been kind of on my mind as well.
Well, guys, I'm feeling okay. I just got off of work, had to hurry up, make sure that I made it on time because sometimes it just goes over. But you guys are talking about it's triple digits. Yeah, we're having a triple digits down here in Texas. One thing is not trying to toot my horn or whatever, but I'm having a housewarming party this weekend. So after I finish with everybody here, I got to start preparing for that. So. Um, I'm just great. You know what? I'm also just happy to at least again to have another roundtable and get to know you guys a lot more. And as we talk Niner football,
I will say, Sasha, that your connection this time is significantly better. So you didn't cut out at all that time. Awesome.
y'all aren't gonna let me let this one go, are y'all? Y'all gonna keep throwing this at me, aren't you?
Let's do it. Do it.
But we talked about Niners football, right? And really, we reached a big milestone this past week. The 49ers had their mandatory minicamp, a lot of major headlines, right? We saw Debo Samuel report for the first time this offseason. We saw Nick Bosa and also Trent Williams, three of our major pieces, all show up. Debo Samuel did not practice, the other two did, but it seems like all is in good spirits. And the 49ers, they concluded their minicamp. They are not going to have practice next week, which means the next time we see them is the late July training camp. Brian, what were your takeaways kind of from mandatory minicamp from what you saw?
I think the biggest takeaway was the amount of overwhelming positive information coming out about a handful of players, Trey Lance being one. There seems to be it. I know Colin Cowherd said, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that there's been too much positive coming out about Trey Lance from Santa Clara, which makes him feel like they're, trying to, as he said, trying to sell something. I don't think that's what it is. I think ultimately they, as a team, I think his teammates, his coaches, the front office, I think they've seen the overwhelming negativity surrounding the Trey Lance narrative, especially in the national media. And so to a certain extent, I think it's a little bit of trying to battle that. But also, I genuinely believe in the kid. So I'm not surprised by the positive feedback coming out. But also, one that I thought was interesting was the amount of positive feedback coming out about Jake Brendel. Now, I do take some of that with a grain of salt, right? Jake Brendel is, as it stands now, the leader in the clubhouse to take over for Alex Mack at the center position. And, I think you always have to take some of this with a grain of salt, just simply because what else are they going to say? If he's not good, they're not gonna be like, man, this guy sucks. Like, we better get someone in here quick, or it's going to be bad. So I'm not looking for them to say that, but when you hear Trent Williams say, hey, this guy, it's like having another coach out there, or when you hear Trey Lance talk about his athletic ability, I think it tends to it tends to ease some fears a little bit. Now, obviously, we got to wait for training camp to see how things kind of play out a little bit more. But I was most excited to hear the positive things coming out about Brendel, and then obviously those positive things coming out about Lance, and then obviously again the big one, Debo did show up, and not only did he show up, but while he didn't participate, he was still out at practice. He was following along with his own play sheet. He was chirping at the defense. He was, joking around with his teammates. He does not look like a player that wants out. He just looks like a player that is wanting his contract, and I think that's going to happen. I would say probably within the next month or so.
Yeah, to your point, elephant in the room, and for all the Niner faithful to agree with, just having Deebo Samuel there for minicamp. I know he didn't do much, but actions speak louder than words. It's a good sentiment. It's not to say that he's for sure going to get the deal he wants or what have you, but I think that they are on the right track. And just to compare, didn't do too much, but NBA, you remember Ben Simmons when he went and reported to mandatory camp, and he was checking on his phone, and he was really kind of disconnected from his teammates. And so, Debo wasn't like that. He was very much a part of the team. They welcomed him with open arms. Even Kyle Juszczyk made notes that it was good to see Debo, Trent Williams, Nick Bosa. They've been training and doing their own thing in the offseason, but to have everyone back, you could really feel the camaraderie. But conversely, you got DK Metcalf with the Seahawks, where, the same agent as A.J. Brown, same agent as Deebo Samuel, and he was a no-show at their mini camp as well. So actions speak louder than words. Obviously, there's a lot more to unfold for the offseason, but it's on the right path. And then obviously you have Trey Lance. Not only have you been hearing about him on the positive notes, but it's been nice to see him take some strikes down the field. I know that he's been a little bit more aggressive. It's just training camp, but it's good to see him, put that arm to use.
Well, I guess my impression right now, I think I was telling Justin at the beginning, and I'm happy about no injuries. That's the thing that I will always say, because it seems like the past couple of years, we've been reading or writing about something about a major injury to a major player that's going into like a mini camp or some off-season program, and now how are we going to fill the void? No injuries. I've been seeing nothing but positive stuff coming out about it. There were no major concerns. Yeah, maybe we're overselling Trey Lance because that's like what Colin said. But something. Where do we like? I think Brian just said it best. What are we going to say? We're going to just say that this guy, he can't do this. You can't do something like that. I mean, from the little videos that I've seen and everything that's going on, he's looking really nice. He looks like he's ready to go. Now, he looks like he's really ready to go and take, to be that number one going up against Chicago in week 1. I was really impressed with Juwan Jennings. From what I was from all reports are saying, it looks like he's ready to really try to take another step, because last year he just came out of nowhere and he just slowly came into it, because we didn't really have a true number 3 until he really took over. Maybe he's ready to take that spot. I was really impressed with that with the way how he's going right now. And I'm also impressed with Nick Bosa not shutting down the contract talks, because we know when it comes to money, everybody starts talking about money and about this. They let it linger, but he shut that down the moment somebody brought it up. And the only thing he wants to do is worry about playing. And everybody in the front office is like, he's going to be here. We're going to resign him. The only thing that looks like the Niners, from what my impression is, like, they're ready for a championship. They're trying to make that run. And that's the big thing that I saw.
Chris, what were your major takeaways in away from minicamp?
I think I mentioned something in our Slack channel about it. That it's difficult for me to pay too much attention to minicamp and some of the early off-season activities, just because everything is so very positive about everybody, which is good. It's a lot better than everything being negative. But it's sort of with some outlets, it's a little excessive, and it's hard to tell what's reality and what's just sort of the narrative that they're going on with, and just sort of repeating the same stuff over and over. And if Lance plays as well as he's said to have been playing in actual football games, then the Niners are going to have a fantastic season. I mean, it's well beyond my expectations or anybody's expectations, but I probably would guess that he won't be as magical as he has been reported to be. But of course, it's good to hear that he's haven't been any major problems, and I like the way that he's thrown some spirals this off season, which is a nice change of pace from last year. I can only imagine, like, with he sort of has that but he throws a spiral like I do, but he has the arm of like Kaepernick, so the things coming in at like 90 miles an hour, but it's like, man, I think it's not in a tight spiral. I mean, no one's cashing it. And that first game he came in, and everyone was dropping the ball, and the announcers are wondering why. I'm like, are you really confused as to why? Like, how could anybody catch that ball? Because it is wobbling just a little bit. You're gonna have a hard time. And if he's able to tighten that up a little bit, then that'll definitely help him and help out his receivers and help out his drop numbers. Because I mean, it was definitely evident that the receivers were not ready to catch a pass that looked like his. And I know, like, sometimes when you're catching a ball from a left-handed quarterback as opposed to a right-handed quarterback, it takes a little bit to get that down. But this is more of a, like, I'm body catching everything because this bullet is just flying in there, and I just need to stop it in some capacity. And it's hard to make those crazy one-handed grabs when the ball's not coming in a nice tight spiral. So overall, keep the good news coming. I wish some people would tone it down a little bit and give it to us straight. If someone's not looking so good, then they're not looking good, and it just seems like it's that the media is really up on players, and they're up on them every day, and that's just not the way it works when you're practicing. I mean, you have down days, and from what we've seen, like, the same players are all up and the same players are all down. So I guess that media sort of made their decision on it, and now I'm just excited to see some of myself, to see to see with my own eyes, to make my own opinions, as opposed to reading those of others. So far so good. Like you said, no jinx there, but let's try to stay away from the injury bug this year.
Yeah, and for me, last week when we were talking, right, I thought personally that Jake Brendel was going to be the starting center. I talked about it and talked not only about the connection with Trey Lance. We saw last year, right? Trey Lance even alluded to it. Them two played together the entirety of the season. They were both on the second team during the offseason. Jimmy Garoppolo, like he said, worked with Alex Mack, while Brendel worked with Trey Lance. But not only that, Brendel's athleticism, like I said last week, is off the charts. 9.94 RAS score. Almost every person, when talking about Brendel, talks about that athleticism, be it Trey Lance, be it Kyle Shanahan, be it Trent Williams. And then on top of that, the rapport is there. What the 49ers want in an offensive lineman is there in terms of the athletic ability. But not only that, the offensive line coach, Chris Forster, actually vouched for Brendel. That's something that is important to me, because when a coach specifically wants a player, especially if it's not some star player, you gotta sense that there's something, just a little something about that player. Chris Forster was the guy that wanted Kyle Shanahan to sign Jake Brendel. He opted out during the COVID year, but they brought him in for 2021. This rapport now with Lance is there, and I think he's a good bridge option. So it seems like the conversation on offensive line has shifted away from the competition at center to really the competition at right guard. who's going to start there? Is it going to be Brunskill or is it going to be Jalen Moore? Can the young player take over the veteran incumbent starter? And to me, I think that is the most important battle because now Brunskill has finally been set into a position where he didn't play poorly last year, but also the 49ers have high hopes for Jalen Moore, who they've been looking to move into a guard position. So there, I think that is a very important competition. And I also think it's going to bring out the best for the 49ers because they have two guys who are now settled into a role who can compete it out. Because if Jalen Moore beats out Brunskill, who we saw play pretty adequately last year and also has experience at the position for an entire year now, then we should be pretty confident about Jalen Moore. And if Brunskill wins the job, we have continuity along the offensive line, which is also important and which will help out Mike DeLynch. So that's kind of how I see the offensive line now. As for some other takeaways, I mean, we talked about Deebo Samuel, and then I think Chris or I forget, it was either Chris or Justin that mentioned Nick Bosa in his contract. I actually think Nick Bosa isn't getting an extension this year, and I actually think it's in his best interest not to. The reason is when we look at all these contract extensions, they don't immediately kick in. They actually kick in the year after normally via a big signing bonus, or like that's when the majority of the contract kicks in. That's how all these salary cap hits for the actual year even decrease by a little bit sometimes, if not staying the same. So Nick Bosa isn't going to get any major hit to his salary cap this year. It's not like he's getting a major influx of money. So really, he can take his fifth-year option, or he can take the option, which is for 2023, and negotiate it next offseason, and he can make probably even more money given that other contracts that we might not have expected start rolling in, which pushes his numbers, both guarantee and AAV up. So that's kind of my takeaway from that situation there. But overall, for minicamp, like Chris said, it's been mainly positive, right? Be it about Trey Lance, be it about some of the young guys. And I think there was a good balance because in the early stages in OTAs, we got to see a ton of young guys practice because a lot of these veterans weren't there. And then at minicamp, we got to see a lot of these veterans come back in. So the rookies and all these young guys got their practice. They got reps with the first team and all. And now, like the 49ers have a better look going into training camp because minicamp was such a short time as to which of those rookies they can really integrate into this 2022 season. And I don't just mean rookies, I mean all these young players because some of the names that really popped out, Ray McLeod, he might vie for a bigger role than we might expect. And so people like that, maybe even Drake Jackson, right? After an extended look with Nick Bosa out, he probably got a ton of reps with Ebucom and with the rest of the group there. So I'm very interested now to see in training camp which of those guys that may have shown out in these last couple of weeks actually get the expanded role in training camp, and can they produce with that expanded role?
I would say I really actually liked what I heard from both Bosa and Ebucom when it came to Drake Jackson. Both of them talked very glowingly about him. Bosa even said, hey, that kid can do more as a rookie than I ever could in terms of his bend and his kind of ability to get to the edge and then use that bend to get around a tackle. He has incredible athletic ability. He has incredible balance. Somewhere I read, and I don't know the validity of this, I forgot to look it up, but apparently he may have a gymnastics background, which would speak to his flexibility and things like that. The one thing that I do want to push back on, Rohan, is your idea that Bosa may not negotiate an extension this year. For a player who missed an entire season with an ACL injury and someone who has had a core muscle injury in college and also an ACL tear in high school, I don't know if he's comfortable waiting because, again, if he goes into this season without an extension and then something terrible happens, God forbid, right? Well, now he doesn't really have a ton of negotiating power because he's coming off an ACL tear and he's going into his fifth year option, right? Which would be fine. And it's a different situation than Deebo because he was the second overall pick versus the second round pick, right? His contract is not even in the same stratosphere as Deebo's, but it just seems like if his agent is worth his salt, he's trying to get this done now simply because the numbers are huge and he's got a client that I don't want to say has an injury history because that makes it seem like he's injured all the time, but he does. He has an injury history, right? He's torn 2 ACLs and he has a core muscle injury. So not to say that he can't, stay healthy for the remainder of his career. But if I'm Nick Bosa, I'm not necessarily betting on that. I would rather, if it's on the table, I would rather do it now. And I think if they do get rid of Jimmy, if they trade Jimmy prior to, the end of camp, then I think that could come along quickly, because it's really that money that frees up that 20, that 24 and change that they would free up. And by the way, we saw there was an article on ESPN today. Maybe the 49ers and Browns should just trade Garoppolo and Mayfield straight up. That's a god awful idea. And the 49ers would never, ever do that. There's no reason, right? Why would you trade Jimmy Garoppolo when you could just release him and pay him $1.4 million, only to bring back $18.8 million and a malcontent backup quarterback? No, thanks. I'm good there. But I do think Cleveland is a destination to look at, because my hope is that Deshaun Watson doesn't play another down in the NFL. But at the very least, there better be at least a season-long suspension. I don't even know if you would call it that, but yeah, a season-long suspension at the very least. And so, does Cleveland want to go into the season with Jacoby Brissett, or would they rather go into the season with a Jimmy Garoppolo? And not only that, maybe you trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, you restructure that deal, right? So he's doesn't have the kind of hit that he would if you just trade straight up. And then you have a second year of Jimmy Garoppolo available just in case, victims 25, 26, 27, and 28 come out while he's suspended. And all of a sudden, Deshaun Watson, you paid him $230 million to just, go away. That's, but yeah, we're not trading for Baker Mayfield. That was on the timeline today. And I was like, that is one of the dumbest ideas I've seen.
Yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. Real quick on your Nick Bosa point, that is true. Nick Bosa could very well demand a contract extension. I wouldn't be one at all surprised if he gets one this offseason. And like you said, the timetable, there isn't really a rush to do it as long as it's done this offseason, because there doesn't seem to be any major contracts at the position that can really change the market coming up this offseason. I think they're all done with the Donald contract, which really doesn't compare given their different positions in a way. And also the TJ Watt and all that kind of stuff was done previously in previous off seasons. So you're right. I would not be surprised if it happened this season, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Bosa betted on himself, given his fifth-year option is guaranteed for injury. So that's the way that I look at it. Regarding your Baker Mayfield point, yeah, there's no way that's happening. The reason that Jimmy Garoppolo's contract is somewhat valuable as compared to Mayfield's is because it's non-guaranteed. The team with that contract has all the choice on what they can do with that contract, whereas Mayfield's is completely guaranteed. And so whoever has it doesn't have any flexibility whatsoever. I agree with that. Justin, you had any other thoughts?
No, I know you mentioned that for Aaron Donald, it's a non-comp for Nick Bosa, but I mean, it's worth noting, just looking at the details. So he's got 3 years, 95 mil. He's the only non-quarterback to make north of 90 mil. Everyone else, they're quarterbacks. You got Aaron Donald, Deshaun Watson. And, if I'm Nick Bosa under his camp, that's a pretty good comp.
Yeah, most definitely. And we just talked about kind of like what we took away from minicamp. And really the next thing after minicamp is training camp, right? So a lot of what we said, like Chris said, is positive. What are some of our biggest concerns in a way going into training camp? And we can go backwards. So Chris, we can start with you.
Biggest concerns. I want to see these guys on the field. I want to make sure that we are a better team this year than we were last year, because on paper that's questionable, and offensive line definitely questionable, quarterback definitely questionable. Outside of that, strong safety. I guess we've decided on a strong safety. Not a guy who's quite like Tart. Not a guy that you want manning the the center of the field in a cover 3 or cover 1, but I guess he's the guy we're going with, and he is fan favorite, and it's like impossible not to like him. But at the same time, it was a little surprising to me that they must have made this decision a while ago, because they haven't said a word about the position other than picking up a backup from another team. So I think that those are the 3 areas where I'm most concerned. I mean, of course, everyone wants to see what Trey does when pads go on and there's a little bit of contact, not with him, hopefully, but but with the other players around the field. And so I say quarterback. I mean, I'm more just interested in the running game more than I am concerned, and provided that Debo's back, a little bit of secondary, and then a whole lot of offensive line. So it's definitely gonna be interesting to see where we end up. And one thing I was sort of noting on that is, I guess that Aaron Banks has already won the left guard job without really trying out. But I guess he's just been given the job, because I haven't heard anything other than the fact that he's going to be playing left guard this season, which is, understandable considering where they drafted him, but questionable considering how he played last year. So, I feel like it's a lot better to keep on the left side next to Trent Williams. I mean, that's the only way he's going to thrive. He would be a nightmare. He'd be on the right side with McGlinchey. But have you guys heard anything about him other than the normal? He's transformed his body over the offseason. Like we hear about every offensive lineman who's fat. So outside of that, has there really been any talk as to if there's a competition there, or is the job just been given to him and there's not really anybody even competing for it?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, the interesting about any team for that matter is, how a team evaluates their team. They really show their cards by their draft selection. And so for the Niners to not even address strong safety, to your point, to not even address offensive line until the later rounds, pretty much already shows where they're at with the position. So Hufanga, obviously, and then you have the entire interior line where they just give the green light already for both Banks, Brendel, Brunskill for that matter. So, it's interesting to see the Niners instantly give them the benefit of the doubts, because I've seen that in years past. It really hasn't worked. Just already assuming that the position would be manned and, injuries or whatever it happens, but you see them scrambling. I think what's going to be really interesting to see in training camp is hopefully that notorious injury bug doesn't get them this time around, because I remember this time last year, Jeff Wilson and all these other running backs were falling out. Hopefully for our interior line, because it's such a crucial time for them, both in, Aaron Banks and Brendel and all these other guys that you're giving them really high expectations and hopes for, that they can have the time to, gel well with this new offensive line and put it together with a new signal caller. So nothing in particular position-wise. I think it's just overall, these new starters, if they can make that jump. And hopefully we'll find out this offseason.
Sasha, what about you?
My biggest concern was probably, like I said, like last week, was the offensive line. And I know, Rohan, you kind of got me had me looking at Jake Brendel after, you were really high on him last week. You were just really on him. And then I read your article about it, and I'm really looking forward to see if he's really going to be that guy about it. Because with me, it's more about the 49ers had one of the best offensive lines last year. I want to say that they were top 5. And then now we lose two big pieces from Laken Tomlinson to free agency, and Alex Mack to retirement. Now we got two interiors that need to be taken care, that need to be filled. We're hoping that Aaron Banks can stay healthy. Daniel Brunskill, I like the way how he's just came out of nowhere, and he's been able to be able to be that, a good solid interior offensive guard. But who's going to be on that other side? Is it going to be Jalen Moore? Who's going to do it? And that's my biggest concern, especially with the young signal caller. We don't have to worry about Trent Williams. He's good. Michael Glinchey, I know some people have always had a little bit of issue with him a little bit sometimes. But he's been solid. But my main thing is that offensive line, because we all know if that offensive line isn't set, then we can't move the ball, regardless of the fact of who's on the skill position. Another thing is the secondary for me, because I was just thinking about this, and I know we were all in chat, and I've been screaming over and over, corner, corner, corner. And I know some people are like, well, they got Travarius Ward. And I'm like, yeah, but remember the Chiefs last year were like pretty much dead last in pass protect and pass coverage. So we're bringing him in there. He had a pretty solid year. Hopefully he can be able to go in there and be able to. Maybe it was just the Chiefs as a whole, and he did his thing. Because I didn't see a bunch of Chiefs games. And then Emmanuel Mosley, I like Emmanuel Mosley. I think he's one of my favorite players, but he was coming off of an injury. We had what is his name? Emmanuel Ambry Thomas, and some of these other youngsters in here. It's like, are you guys going to be, are you guys going to really compete with these receivers? Especially in the NFC West, because the NFC West, you already know the receivers are they have killer receivers out there, and the 49ers are getting torched. So those are my big things that I've been hoping that they can get this taken care of, because I'm really worried going into the next season. They don't get this squared away. It'll probably be a long season, or we'll probably be just scratching and surviving and hoping to just pull a rabbit out of our hat, just for a victory.
Yeah, I've actually had a fairly positive view of the 49ers offseason for the entirety of the offseason. If you look at 2021 and you look at the holes on the team, right? Where were the holes? The holes were in the secondary. The holes were special teams. And then you could argue that with better quarterback play, especially in the playoffs. Now, granted, we understand that Garoppolo was injured. I'm not holding that against him. But with better quarterback play in the playoffs, the 49ers are likely in the Super Bowl last year. So to me, those were the three holes, right, that the team had. And they addressed all of them, right? Sasha, I know that you just said that you weren't that impressed with Charvarius Ward. According to Next Gen Stats in 2021, Charvarius Ward allowed when he was the nearest defender, allowed a completion percentage of 40%, which ranked first in the NFL. Had an expected completion percentage of 46.6%, which also ranked first. Allowed 4.6 yards per target, which was third. Allowed a passer rating of 52.5, which was third, and had a tight window rate of 46.7%, which was first. So he's not a big name, but in terms of his performance, he was one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL last season. Now, did the Chiefs secondary perform as well as a whole? No, not really. But that definitely wasn't the fault of Charvarius Ward. I was really excited about that signing. It's the first time that they've had a legit number one corner since Richard Sherman, obviously. And not only that, but they've built incredible depth, right? And that was the issue last year was, they went into the 2021 season counting on Jason Verrett to stay healthy and then counting on Emmanuel Mosley to stay healthy. And when Verrett went down in week 1, all of a sudden, now we're getting games, lots of games with lots of snaps with Josh Norman out there and Dre Kirkpatrick and street free agents because we didn't have the depth. And now you've got, not only do you bring in Charvarius Ward, but you do bring Verrett back. And if Verrett is healthy, then all of a sudden you've got Ward and Verrett on the outside. I'm 100% on board for that combo. But if Verrett isn't healthy to start the season, and I think he may start on the pup and kind of eye the second half of the season after that week 9 bye to come back. But you've got Mosley on the outside, who is criminally underrated. Darquez Denard apparently has been playing pretty well in the slot, but you've also got Womack, who you drafted. Diamador Lenore, haven't heard a lot about him, but Ambry Thomas came on late. Ambry Thomas also got burned a couple times at minicamp, so perhaps there's still some growth there. But then you also have Tariq Castro Fields along with Dante Johnson. And so they've built incredible depth, which I think is something that they've been missing. And honestly, it's the first time they've really invested in the secondary in a long time. Is there a hole at strong safety? Absolutely. Is Hufanga going to fill it? It seems like he's the leader in the clubhouse, but I don't think we should count out George Odom. George Odom was a backup in Indianapolis, but when he did play, he played really well. And not only that, but Colts fans were really upset when Odom signed with the 49ers, especially when they saw the contract value, because they thought to themselves, why couldn't we match that? Odom was a good player, great special teams guy. And so I don't think we should count him out either. And then the quarterback, right? And special teams, we got a new coordinator, got a new kick returner, added Oren Burks and George Odom, 2 special teams aces. And so we've plugged holes there. Not only that, but you've got some young guys in the draft and last year's draft that will help fill out that unit. And then quarterback, again, like I said, I am high on Trey. I think more than anything, the person of Trey Lance has impressed me the most. His work ethic, as Steve Young said, he's processing at the right speed now, right? He's making the right read almost every time. And so I think maybe not in the first half of the season, but I think we will see that quarterback play step up. And so to me, the only hole, right, is just the unknowns on the offensive line. And really what this team has done, and personally, you got to respect it, I think, is they have really committed to paying their guys top dollar at important positions like left tackle, like tight end, like wide receiver, like middle linebacker, right? Like cornerback. And then they've committed to filling the rest of the roster with young guys. And so eventually you're going to have to let those young guys play. And that's what they're doing now, right? They're going to let them play. They have to. And so do we know whether they're going to be good or not? No. Do we think that they believe in them? It sure seems that way. So while the offensive line is definitely the hole on the team right now, and it's going to be tough to win a championship if your offensive line is poor, we don't know that it's going to be poor. We just don't know what to expect, right? We don't know what to expect from Aaron Banks, but it sounds like he's the leader in the clubhouse at left guard. We don't know what to expect from Brendel. And also Brendel took all the reps because Brunskill wasn't playing. So I think Brunskill is going to have an opportunity to battle for that position as well. If Brunskill wins that center position and Brendel is the backup, then who plays right guard? Rohan mentioned Jalen Moore earlier. Sounds like Moore is a little weary of switching sides. He was a left tackle at, I believe it was Central Michigan, I think is where they drafted him out of last season. And so he may be more comfortable on the left side, and maybe his role is more comfortable as like a swing tackle. But you've also got Spencer Burford, who they drafted in the 4th round this year, and also Nick Zakel, who could also be one of the guys that eventually slides in at center. You've got Donovan West at center, Jason Poe, right? So while there aren't a lot of answers, there are a lot of options, and I'm okay with that because eventually those options are going to shake themselves out. So ultimately for me, the biggest thing I'm concerned about is the offensive line, but I'm not ready to sound the alarm until we get into and through training camp and we see kind of how these guys perform.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to agree with Brian. I actually thought it was the offensive line. And I'm not necessarily worried about the players. Let me get that straight because from what we've heard about Aaron Banks, he was ready to start midway last season. And had we started losing, he probably would have started the second half of the year. Um, to me, it's more the cohesion of the unit because a lot of these guys haven't played with each other. Daniel Brunskill has not played with either Jake Brendel or Aaron Banks before. And if Brunskill starts at center, guess what? That's him trying out another position in another year, which means there needs to be better cohesion. Again, he wouldn't have played with Jalen Moore or Aaron Banks then. So it's the cohesion that is required on the offensive line that I'm a little wary about at the moment, and that I hope training camp will help fix with those key reps, especially with pads on against a stout defensive line that the 49ers have. Additionally, Mike McGlinchey is coming off the injury that he has, the torn quadricep injury. So is Justin Skill going to potentially start to begin the year? We've heard great things about McGlinchey. We've heard that he should be ready by training camp, but the 49ers might even take it slower. They might let Skill start for a little bit, which means even if it's not Brunskill at right guard, if it's Jalen Moore, that's another issue in a way because Jalen Moore has not played with Mike McGlinchey at all either. So to me, it's not necessarily indicative of the players. It's just indicative that the 49ers and their offensive line unit has not really played together as much, which might lead to some early season struggles, which really, in my opinion, the 49ers can't necessarily afford as much given the early, given how easy it is at the beginning, right? The first two games, in my opinion, are must win games given how tough the schedule is. And so if you have struggles on that realm, we've seen Trey. We know he has the ability to escape the pocket and all, which is an important part of his game. But if there are offensive line struggles, we don't want that to be a factor of why we lose one of those first two games. As for the secondary that people are talking about, I thought it actually significantly improved, even with the loss of Jaquaski Tart in the safety room. Travarius Ward, like Brian said, in my opinion, was a very good corner, very good signing at a good, reasonable price. He was the second best corner, in my opinion, on the market in terms of value. He's only 25 years old, heading into his prime, and was the lockdown corner not only last year, but in reality for the past 3 years. He had somewhat of a down year in 2020, but in 2019 he had a very good year, and he bounced back in 2021 to be one of the top man corners in the league. Additionally, because we have Charvarius Ford, because we have Emmanuel Mosley and potentially Barrett for the second half of the season, we're going to be able to play a lot more cover one man, which we had to shy away from last season after we lost Jason Barrett to more of a cover or more of a zone scheme, which we couldn't rely much on our cornerbacks. With cover one man, that means Jimmy Ward can play as the overhang safety, which allows Talanoa Hufanga or even George Odom to get into their element as a box safety, because we've heard great things about Hufanga, but we've also heard that Odom has been a very stout tackler at the line of scrimmage, which will be allowed if he's allowed to play in a box role. So I think we're going to have a pretty good rotation of safeties with those two in the box because our defensive scheme is going to allow for it. And I think the safeties, not safeties, but the cornerback room and then the defensive line have a very good relationship in that one helps the other and it's vice versa, right? Because the defensive line is going to be wrecking havoc, you can play cover one man. And because you're playing cover one man, you're allowing the defensive line to get there because you're sustaining coverage for the first 2.5 seconds, which means the defensive line can get there. Overall, I think that improves the level of your defense, especially when you have the linebacker core that the 49ers have. So to me, like Brian said, my major concern is the offensive line. How is that unit going to respond early? And can whatever group it may be it the favorite right now to be Brendel and then Brunskill, or be it Brunskill and then Jalen Moore, or Brendel and Jalen Moore, can they develop a rapport with Trey Lance and more importantly, with themselves in the early part of the season, or will that take some time to develop?
I'm just to say this though, and this is something you see on the comments all the time for Niners Webzone. The Niners are continuing to trust in the system, and they're assuming that those guys that have been in the system make the next step. But you look just right across in the division, you look at the Rams, they were able to sign big names like Bobby Wagner and somehow able to retain their players in Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, Stafford, and save cap. But everyone wanted in free agency, and this is something that the Niners, they are what they are in terms of free agency, but people wanted J.C. Jackson. People wanted Stephon Gilmore. They wanted the big names. And I think the reason why, Sasha had mentioned Ward having some question marks is because he's not a household name. But to your point, He's got some really good stats. If you look in between the lines, it's just that, from a Niner fan from the outside in, when you hear about Ward on the Chiefs, you don't really think good things about the secondary. But we shall see because, a much better pass rush in San Francisco versus Kansas City. So
I hear you. I hear you about the Rams, right? And I get it, but that's arguably our biggest rival now, right? Because Seattle is falling off a little bit. But you're right. They did sign Bobby Wagner, right? Am I afraid of Bobby Wagner? No. Why? Well, because now the Rams have one good linebacker. Hey, good for you, right? They had 0 last year. Now they have 1. So there's an upgrade. Cool, right? What else did they lose? They lost their arguably Hall of Fame left tackle and Andrew Whitworth, and they lost Von Miller, right? And so have they gotten better? I don't know. I would argue they haven't gotten better. Have they gotten worse? I think there's an argument to be made that they have, or at the very least they're the same. And ultimately, what did it come down to? Right? We beat them 3 straight times, right? Last season, we beat them twice last season. And then obviously that third time, it didn't work out, and they were ahead for a long time. Right. And so I'm not that afraid of the Rams, and they lost Robert Woods. Right. And they brought in Allen Robinson. No idea what that fit will look like. I mean, Allen Robinson, I imagine it'll be good. Right. But what else they lose? OBJ. Could he re-sign there? For sure. Cause he's still a free agent, but they definitely lost dudes. There's no question about that. They also lost their starting free safety, I believe. And I believe they lost their number 2 corner as well. So there's definitely I think sometimes as fans, we get so hyped about the offseason about wanting to sign every big name free agent. It's like, well, you can't sign every big name free agent when you already have Trent Williams, when you already have a George Kittle, when you already have a Deebo Samuel, a Fred Warner, a Jimmy Ward, a Nick Bosa, right? You can't sign everybody. And I'd rather sign our guys than bring outside guys in. And so I think they made a splash with that Ward signing, right? That was a 3-year, $39 million contract or whatever, or something along those lines. So, is he going to see all that money? Probably not. It's a Parag Marate contract. Very rarely are they going to see all that money, but they did make the splash, right? They made that splash with Ward, and then they made smaller moves, right, to shore up not only the special teams, but again, we made the strength, the defensive line, and arguably that defensive line is stronger now, right? They drafted Drake Jackson, but they also brought back Kerry Hyder, and they brought in Kimiko Torre, and so they made incremental increases on there on the defensive line as well. So, did the Rams get big names in Bobby Wagner and Allen Robinson? Sure. Did they extend Cooper Kupp and and Aaron Donald? Yeah, but they were already on the team. So I'm not that impressed with what the Rams have done. Everybody is gaga over the Rams, and I honestly, personally believe that they're overrated.
Love it. I love it.
Hey, real quick, before we go to the next one, I just want to say one thing. The reason why I'm not impressed with Javarius Ward, it's not because it's not a big name. Of course, just like what Brian said, you can't get the big names. We can't all get that. It's just that I've seen even though I didn't watch a couple of his games, the games that I did see him, I wasn't impressed with. Let's go with the I was just thinking about when they played the Chargers. I want to say it was week 3. I saw Mike Williams just really go at him, and he got a lot of that 122 that Mike Williams got when the Chargers came back. I also remember when they played Jamar Chase got that rookie record. He got a couple of those. He got a healthy dose of that as well. Now, it's not just saying that, these are superstar players and, that can happen. But the thing is this, like I said a moment ago, we're this is the NFC West, and you're going to be going up against a bunch of these big name players. DK Metcalf, if he gets off his I'm not playing, he's going to be something. He's going to be something. We've seen what Cooper Kupp is about. Over there in Arizona, they got some monsters out there. That's the reason why I said I'm not impressed with. I was like, I don't know, but because again about that. But then Brian, he threw these stats at me. Okay, fine, yeah, he did that, but I'm just remembering some of these big games that I'm seeing some of these other players got right there, and I remember, and I'm seeing about how some of the Niners secondary, how they were last year. But maybe it is just with the depth that you got, because you did put me on that. Maybe not with the depth, and they got these other players. We don't have to worry so much about it instead of bringing players like, Josh Norman out, who was just PIing everybody every freaking day. But that's just me right there.
Right. And real quick to speak on Brian's point about the Rams, like while they got a lot of big name players, it's really dependent on how they play and the players that they lost. Brian mentioned a good amount of them, right? They lost their number 2 corner. They don't have a replacement for that. And so while you have Jalen Ramsey, all that means is the Rams are going to be targeted on that other half of the field. You bring in Bobby Wagner, guess what? Unfortunately, while Bobby Wagner has been stout in the run game, the main thing that the Rams have had an issue with is pass coverage with their linebackers, and they didn't solve that hole either. That's the reason the 49ers were able to defeat them twice last year. It's the reason why they were ranked 29th in DVOA in pass coverage with those linebackers, and they didn't really improve that as well. Not only did they lose Whitworth on that offensive line, they lost Austin Blythe and Austin Corbett, I believe. Corbett went to Carolina, and they don't have an immediate replacement for those guys either. They drafted, I think, Logan Bruce, or I forget how to say his name, in the 4th round. But to ask a 4th-round rookie to really replace a veteran like that, I think that's a tough task. Even if it was with Andrew Whitworth there, maybe it's a little less of a tough task because you have such a good player. But it's with Joe Noteboom, who, while he's been a good underrated player, he also hasn't had a starting capacity for a majority of his time with the Rams. Then not only did they lose Von Miller, they lost their top defensive tackle against the run in Sebastian Joseph Day, and they also lost Kamani Okoronkwo, as a pass rusher, a situational pass rusher. So they lost 3 pieces, both of star talent and of depth. And so they really didn't have a replacement for that either. I understand you have Aaron Donald, but double team Aaron Donald, and then the rest of that defensive line has to enact. They have drafted other players. They've drafted extremely well. That's the reason that they can keep up this success, right? They continuously draft well in the mid rounds, but at some point, the amount of star talent is overlooks the idea that because they continuously lose players. They lost on offense, they lost on defense, and they lost on special teams with the loss of Johnny Hecker this past offseason. So they've had serious games for sure. They've also had serious losses. We'll see whether the gains that they've.
Oh, we lost you, Rohan. Your sound went out.
Uh-oh.
Are you
There
good?
you go.
Oh, he's back.
Okay, we're good. We're good. But essentially what I'm saying is we need to see whether these gains offset the losses because they are at key positions for the Rams, and they don't necessarily have immediate replacements at every one of these positions.
Real quick, I did want to address Sasha when it came to Charvarius Ward. Ward was actually injured last season, got injured in week 2, and then didn't come back until week 7. So that week 3 game against San Diego, he wasn't on the field. And then
he wasn't a part of that game. I thought he was in that game. My bad.
No, he was not.
Okay.
He was a part of the game in week 10, and he was targeted 4 times. He gave up 1 reception for 27 yards, and then against Cincinnati, he was only targeted 3 times. They completed 3 passes for a total of 19 yards and no touchdowns. So again, I'm not a Charvarius Ward defender, but I do think that as Justin said, he's not a household name,
Right.
but when you look at when you do look at his production, you see a superstar level production, at least last season and in 2019 as well.
I really thought he was in that week 3 game. I could have sworn. Thank you for correcting me on that.
No worries.
So we just
if he's as good as you say he is, Brian, then I think we have a lot less to worry about in the secondary.
Yeah, because he's sitting here defending him like anything. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if he's actually like a true number 1 corner, then that will allow me to sleep a little better at night. Because otherwise, it's really our offense is going to go wherever our defensive line. Our defense is going to go wherever our defensive line takes us. So, we get to the quarterback, and we're, our secondary looks good. We don't get to the quarterback, and they look horrible. Is sort of the way that I look at it. So
it's
that's
definitely
why
a
it's not
symbiotic
really,
relationship, right?
Yeah. But I feel like with the Niners, and at least the defense that they've implemented from Salah on, it's just really dependent on the front four, and then the occasional middle linebacker or corner blitz. But I mean, it's basically those front four, and those front four need to get there. And if they get there, then we have one of the best defenses in the league. And if they don't get there, then we get torched by everybody. I mean, I sort of see it that simple, and unfortunately, when there's some games where certain players are allowed to get tackled and held and who knows what, it makes it really tough on us to be able to play to play defense when when Bose has a couple guys on top of him, strangling them or whatever.
That's where Drake Jackson comes in, right?
I'll say this about Ward, though. You might not know him in particular versus J.C. Jackson, but from what I've seen, he's like the anti-Josh Norman. Like, he'll actually turn towards the ball, make a play, which is beautiful. That's really refreshing. So hopefully he can keep it up in San Francisco.
So I didn't think that he was that bad last year. I mean, everyone just hates on Norman. I mean, for obvious reasons for him. When he was younger and good. But but I didn't think he was that bad. Like, I mean, it's like some of the calls are sort of ticky tacky. I mean, obviously he wasn't good, but he wasn't the train wreck like that. The one kid that it's not his fault, but that we threw in against
Brian Allen,
Miami.
Brian Allen.
Yeah, that was
I mean, I've forgotten his name on purpose. But even that, or even Verrett when we threw him in against the Steelers before he was ready.
Oh my God!
And they just went right after him. And, I'm sorry.
Before he was ready, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Steelers knew he wasn't ready because the first pass was right at him, and I think it was a pass interference, and then a couple plays later it was like a 45-yard touchdown, and then we never saw him again. So I think they realized before we realized that he was not ready to come back, and which made it that much sweeter when he came back so strong. So hopefully we get another sweet comeback this year.
Yeah.
I know there's a hole at strong safety, but I genuinely believe this is the best secondary that the Shanahan era has put together. And to see that then go with one of the deepest defensive lines they've also put together, that's exciting to me. I genuinely believe that this defense is a top 5 defense. And if Verrett can come back healthy, I think it ends up being a top 3.
I think Pro Football Focus put the Niners at number 1 for their front 7, right? They're right up there. So,
yeah, exactly. And I mean, we just talked really about some of these concerns, right? Where there aren't that many with this roster. But adding on to the concerns, what are some of the moves in a way the 49ers kind of should make, or do you want them to make prior to training camp so they can really solidify this roster heading into 2022?
Trade Jimmy Garoppolo.
Perfect answer.
Yeah, and I'm wearing the jersey, and I agree. Just because it is going to be a mess if he's on the team. Because I mean, they're lucky they're playing away a lot in the beginning of the year because it's like when you're not doing well, and I'm not saying that Lance isn't going to do well, but obviously there are going to be hiccups like there are with any quarterback, especially a first year playing quarterback. The Boo Birds do come out, and it might be a little bit different with the level of hate that a lot of Niners fans have for Garoppolo, but usually your backup quarterback is the fan favorite. Fans like players no more than they like their backup quarterback when their starting quarterback isn't doing well. So a controversy is the last thing that the Niners need. And this, I mean, I've just been really disappointed with this fan base over the last couple of years and just the way that they've really gone at, both players as well as both sides, and it's sort of divided, the fan base between you're either one guy, you're on one guy's side or the other guy's side. Like, you can't just be on the winning side. So as much as I think more of Garoppolo than the average fan does, but I think that he gives the 49ers a better chance to win the Super Bowl this year. The 49ers drafted Lance, and they gave up a whole lot more than anyone was expecting them to give up to get him. So he's the guy, and you have to accept that he's the guy. And if he's the guy, then Jimmy needs to be off the team, because you can't have Lance, make a couple, rookie mistakes, and then Jimmy comes in there and then has one of his good games, and then we can't go through that as a fan base, let alone on the team. And in the clubhouse, we're extremely lucky that both players are apparently very, very professional about the way that they both handled either having a player drafted for you, or having to sit while and watch while another quarterback struggles at times. So at least we've had that, and it hasn't really divided the locker room. But it could start dividing it if we do have both those guys out there. So I really don't know what's going to happen, because it's sort of surprising. It really wasn't played very well by the Niners. They really should have talked Jimmy up a lot more than they did, and gave him more attempts at throwing touchdown passes in the red zone instead of running everything in, and really boost his stats up a little bit so that he would have a little more trade value. And Shanahan isn't a big Garoppolo fan, and lots of people aren't big Garoppolo fans, and you have these players are getting signed, and you're like, my goodness, like you're signing who over Garoppolo? It's just crazy to me. But we are where we are, and I'd be surprised if they cut him. I mean, I would rather they keep him than cut him. But considering we got 2 number 2s for Alex Smith, it's just gonna be sort of sad that we're not gonna get 2 2s for Garoppolo, who is tons better at this point in his career. So, but I will continue to wear this jersey until we trade him. I mean, not like every day, like all the time, like in the shower, but at least on this on these video pods.
Hey, in regards to backup quarterbacks, though, remember that era when they were like, "We want Carr, we want Carr."
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean,
I was there for some of those games, and I didn't necessarily yell about it. I was thinking it.
Yeah,
always the most cheered on quarterback, right? Is the second quarterback, the backup.
Yeah. That's I was not very articulately trying to say.
Yeah. For me, outside of obviously having some clarity for Jimmy Garoppolo for the development of Trey Lance and just to move forward as a locker room, another thing that obvious, but if Deebo Samuel can finally come to terms, if we can just move forward from that, I don't want to check his Instagram or what he does on Twitter like every other day. I just want some clarity, and can we just move forward and just be excited to have Deebo on our team and be honestly the heart and soul of this offense in terms of what he does with the ball in his hands. But the next tweet I get about what he does in social media, I'm going to lose it. So let's just move forward with that.
Sasha, what are your thoughts on what moves need to happen prior to training camp, if any?
Well, really, to be honest with you, I don't see any moves right now. The 49ers have the team. They have everything that they're going to go into, that they're going to go into training camp with. You got it looks like they got their offensive line. I may be wondering what they're doing with it, but the coaching staff knows what they're doing. So they got their players. But we were just, I know Chris was just bringing up Jimmy Garoppolo and just trading him. and get rid of him off there. Then I started looking at the roster, and then I'm just wondering, okay, so we get rid of Jimmy, and let's speak hypothetically. I don't like to, and I'm going to knock on wood. Let's say Trey Lance goes down with an injury. Who's going to come in after? Who's going to come in? Nate Sudfeld. Don't get me wrong. I like Nate when he was at Indiana. I really like Nate. I wanted him to be I wanted him to play for the Niners. I was hoping the Niners would have drafted him when coming out. But thing is that I see that this is a team ready to take that next step. I've tried studying Nate and seeing what he's done, but he barely played, hasn't done anything significant, haven't seen any big game time. Are you going to? I like Brock Purdy. I remember with the Alamo Bowl, I went to watch because I love Wazoo, when Wazoo and Iowa State were down here, and I went to the game, and I saw him his freshman year, and I liked him. But so then he would probably come in, him or Nate. I guess I'm kind of wondering the quarterback position. Where can we go from there? Outside of trade, because if Jimmy's gone, we don't have. So it doesn't. And again, I could be so wrong, and I hope I'm so wrong, but it just doesn't seem strong after trade. So I guess if we're going to say something, are we going to go after a veteran quarterback? Somebody else outside of Nate Sudfeld who knows you are coming in to be the backup. There will not be a quarterback controversy. Don't try to do this. You're number two. So if something happens to him, you're next man up.
Yeah, you're definitely a nice guy. It's okay to say that Sudfeld is Sudfeld. I mean, it is what it is. It's not on you, man. But yeah, I figure that Debo will just play quarterback, since that's what we do when we don't have any players to play the position.
Wildcat.
So, yeah, I think we'll just go with that.
But here's the thing: like, there are very few teams, if any, if their QB1 goes down, that their season isn't in the toilet anyway. Like, I'm not keeping Jimmy Garoppolo on this roster at $27 million just in case Trey Lance goes down with an injury. If Trey Lance goes down with an injury that's going to keep him out for the rest of the season, this season is a loss anyway. Like, I'm not even worried about it. It's, you can't keep somebody at that price tag just in case, right? And so that's why, that's why there are very few QB2s who could come in and lead their team. And every once in a while, maybe one of them catches lightning in a bottle, like a Nick Foles, right? And leads his team to a Super Bowl. But then you look at Nick Foles as a QB1. Is he a QB1? No, probably not, right? So ultimately, we just got to rip the Band-Aid off. He's got to be off this team. We cannot continue to just what if this until his contract runs out. It's Trey Lance's team. You committed to Trey Lance the minute that you gave up what you gave up for him. You got 1 year to redshirt him, and even then, fans, weren't terribly thrilled by it. But I think most of them understand now. Hey, here's what we did last season. Here's why. You cannot keep him on this roster. He's got to go. He's got to go. You got to give some of that money to Debo. You got to give some of that money to Nick Bosa, and you gotta just say, hey, if Trey Lance goes down, we've got Sudfeld, we've got Brock Purdy. We'll try and make it work. Just like when Jimmy went down, we had CJ Beathard and we had Nick Mullins, right? Like, if your QB1 goes down, your season's in the toilet anyway. So we can't, even in that hypothetical, at that point, I would just be like, hey, well, let's see what Sudfeld has. And when Sudfeld doesn't have it, hey, let's see what Purdy has. I mean, that's ultimately what else are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same story in 2019. Jimmy goes down. I mean, we don't really have anybody to back him up. Beathard isn't going to win you any football games. So just got to hope he's healthy. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a major concern for me, because he's not only going to be dealing with an offensive line that, I would believe more than Sasha would believe will struggle, but he'll also be running the ball too. So he got injured in the very limited amount of time that he played last year. So yeah, he has to learn how to protect himself, because he took some shots. I remember in the preseason when I'm like, oof, man, like good thing he's not starting this year because man, you just can't go through a 17 game season and then hopefully a couple more games after that and take big shots like that every game. So yeah, we need to keep him healthy, and the way you keep him healthy is by having a good offensive line, and that's why it's sort of surprising me that we didn't do a little bit more in that area. But I'll just go. I'll use the Sasha method and just assume the coaches know what they're doing. So that's really what I do. But today, that's what I'll do.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it in like the 49ers, and their fans have been very, very known to this, but really our quarterback's health is essentially the predicament of our season. We've seen in the years that Garoppolo has been healthy, we've done well. In the years that Garoppolo isn't healthy, we haven't done well, right? We went 4-12, I believe, in 2019 when we got Nick Bosa with the second overall pick. And then the other 2 years, we've made a Super Bowl in the NFC Championship. So it's definitely understandable. But the point being, Trey Lance, his health is there. If Trey Lance doesn't show up healthy, or if he can't sustain his health over a 17 game period, well then the 49ers, they aren't going to they'll either make the playoffs and have no noise there, or they just don't make the playoffs. But going away from that, back to the question I originally asked about, are there any moves they should make? There's one that's going to be fairly obvious that I believe should happen sooner than later, and that is the release of D Ford. Kyle Shanahan continuously has alluded to it back in the owners' meetings. Just this past week, he said, "I don't expect D Ford to be a 49er." They brought him in for a physical this past Thursday. As soon as he's healthy, they can release him. The release saves $1.2 million off the salary cap. The cap savings are beneficial, but they aren't necessarily that impactful, given we already have some cap from the Alex Mack retirement kind of move and the restructure there that happened there. But it saves you, or not saves you, but it gives you a roster spot which you can use ahead of training camp to get another body that you might be interested in, to add competition, add fire to the fuel. But there's still a good amount of players that can be impactful in free agency remaining at multiple key positions like wide receiver, running back, which the 49ers obviously covet. We've all said it a lot of times. JC Treader is still there. And there's a good amount of guys on defense as well. So, you bring in another guy to compete at one of those positions, which you feel a little less deep at, and then see what happens in training camp. I think that that's something they should do sooner than later so that they're not left in the dust. But yeah, that's kind of a move that we all anticipate will happen over the next couple of weeks. Any final thoughts from anybody before we wrap today's session up?
Nope, I'm good. What about you, fellas?
I'm ready for training camp.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'm ready for regular season.
Let's see where we go with this.
Oh, yeah. But guys, thank you all so much for tuning in to the second episode of the 49ers Webzone Writers Roundtable. We are not sure if we're going to be back before training camp, but the next time you guys hear from us, it'll definitely be one with a ton of news. So thank you all for tuning in. As always, be sure to check out 49ers Webzone. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and check out all of the writer content, including from all of us five, on the website. And yeah, thank you all and tuning out from 49er Faithful.